So we'll go ahead and dive into our content today. Appreciate you guys spending your lunch hour with me and joining me for a little bit this afternoon to get some information on jobs. So my name is Becca Shelton. I am a career advisor here at the University of Richmond. And I work with all of our alumni population and all of our current SPCS students, current MBA students, and graduates of both of those programs. So we will go ahead and before we get started, we'll just, if you all have questions, so we have a lot of content to get to today, so I hope you guys are excited and ready. If you do have questions throughout, just go ahead and pop them when they come into your head, pop them in the Q&A feature down there at the bottom. Instead of chat, it's just easier because I am a one-woman show here. Just easier for me to manage those questions if you use Q&A over chat for that. But chat will remain open if you guys want to chime in there on some other types of things. Feel free to do that. But what we will cover today in terms of job search, if it's been a while, so we'll be talking about sort of understanding the job climate today, which is a little bit different, definitely, than it was maybe a couple years ago, given the state of the pandemic that we've been in for quite some time. We'll also be covering some strategy with your job search, getting organized and staying motivated, and also the lovely technology pieces that are now, well, they've been present for quite some time in the job search, but they have really in the last few years come to light. And I think understanding parts of how the technology influences the application and search process is definitely important for figuring out how to feel confident and successful in navigating. So before we dive into the bulk of our content, I do want to give a few pieces of information here. If you have joined me before for my webinars, this is a review of information for you. However, if you are new with us today, wanted to let you all know that, hey, career services for you as an alumni is free for life. It's awesome. Any alumni from any program at the university, free for life. So what that means is we don't put a limit on how many times we can meet. If you are interested in chatting one-on-one with somebody, I am your person. So feel free to reach out to me for that. There's a lot of different topic areas that we can cover with our one-on-one chats. We can talk about all of those things you see on the left side and more. Just sort of depends on where you are in your journey. If you would like to schedule an appointment with me and but not sure how, the link down there in the little yellow box is Spider Connect. Spider Connect does a lot of stuff for us in career services. However, probably the most useful for you at this point would be scheduling an appointment. If you are thinking to yourself, Becca, everything at the university is named Spider, and I have no idea what that is, that's fine. I will give you directions on how to access it and reset your password if you just shoot me an email real quick. And again, at the end of the presentation, I will have my email address there on file for you. So that's probably the best and easiest way for you to schedule an appointment with me if you want to chat one-on-one, and I'm happy to. I would love to do that. See where you are in your process. We have a bunch of resources over there that you can sort of see what you have access to. I will say the biggest one that I will point out is the link there on the right-hand side for the YouTube page that Alumni Relations runs and manages, and they update it frequently. So if you're interested in any of my content from the past, or any of the really fun content that Alumni Relations does, because they do a lot of fun stuff, all of the recordings of that they do live on their YouTube page, and you can access them at any time that you want to. So for example, this series, all of them live on that page. I did a Confident Career Changes series at the beginning of this calendar year that are on the YouTube page, and all of the other webinars that I've done. And this is being recorded, so we will certainly put this up there if you have to leave in the middle of it or anything. So just want to make you all aware of those services, and we'll go ahead and get into our content. So this is a little bit of a share, and I understand that, sometimes job search is, where we are in our journey is a little bit, maybe sensitive or not something that we're willing to share at this point. So, but if you are willing to share, throw in the chat there for me and let me know sort of where you're at. I'm curious to see the folks in our audience, where you sort of identify yourself in the process of job search. So, maybe you might be reevaluating things, trying to figure out what's really important to you. Maybe you already have done that and you're sort of exploring your options. We've got one person in there exploring options. Or maybe you're narrowing down your choices, or you have made some really good decisions for yourself and you're just sort of in the implementation phase. Wonderful. Well, thank you for chiming in. I'm not stopping anybody from chiming in, but it looks like we've got a really good mix of folks here today. And so hopefully, I think this content will be helpful for you sort of no matter where you are, and especially for those folks that are, maybe up there around the sort of the reevaluating or exploring options. I would say maybe some of those the webinars from the Confident Career Changes series that I've done, that I did at the beginning of the year, some of those might be really helpful for you as well. And so I hope that no matter where you are in your journey on this process, feel free again to please reach out to me and we can chat one-on-one about your situation and your goals. So I appreciate you guys sharing that. So what I wanted to share a little bit, let me get through some of these. What I wanted to share a little bit with this, so talking about sort of reimagining your job search. And this has to do with a little bit of availability in terms of what's a little bit different right now with where we are in this recession, this pandemic recession. It is quite different than if you are in my age bracket, you very much remember the Great Recession a number of years ago. So that would be the 08-09 era, and how things were affected then with industries and companies, and how things have been affected now. This is different. The time that we're in now is different than 2008, 2009, in the sense that certain industries were much more severely impacted by the pandemic, which caused some really drastic changes, layoffs, loss of jobs, things like that, right? And so for certain people in certain industries, it's been really challenging. The Great Recession a number of years ago, that one, it really affected many more industries across the board. And so I think it's important to remember now where we are with this particular recession, because there are certainly industries that are still hiring, and there are ones that are coming back, right? Because we are definitely in a different place. I would even venture so far as to say that we are in a more hopeful place than we were, last year or 6 or 9 months ago, in terms of hireability in certain industries coming back. I truly believe that industries will come back. It will just be, it'll be a little bit of a transition and a bit of a slower period. There is certainly tourism is starting to come back. Hospitality industry is beginning to come back, as we have more vaccines available and people are feeling much more comfortable about doing things that they used to do pre-pandemic. So remembering that, I think, as I like to say recently, hope is on the horizon with that. And so just remember that things will come back. It just might be a little bit of a slower pace. So, what can you do now if you are job searching? Because some of those industries are still coming back, and, like the restaurant industry, I think they're definitely in a transitional period where still a lot of sort of restrictions are in place. So a lot of indoor dining is not necessarily open at this point. However, you know, the hope that is that will be changing sooner rather than later, right? And so what can you do now for this? Maybe you just need to sort of reimagine or think about a different entry point to the career, right? And even if it's an industry unlike hospitality or tourism or food service, it's another industry that was impacted with budget cuts and whatnot. Maybe positions were frozen. Is there another entry point into that industry that you need to really consider? Because remember that I think probably a lot of us, if not most of us on this call, have a decent amount of working years still left in their life. And so remembering that this is definitely not the end game with your professional career. And this is just another sort of fork in the road or another starting point for you. And the position that you end up in maybe in the next few months or so as you are job searching is not the last position you will ever be in, right? And so this is maybe just a slight sidestep from where you had originally planned, but that's okay. It doesn't mean you can't get back on track to where you had intended to be. As you are thinking about reimagining your job search at this point, the other, I think, really important thing to do is remembering that all of the tools and resources that you have in front of you for job search, really think about that as a toolbox. That's an analogy that I love, because when you look at a toolbox, you have a variety of different things in there, right? A hammer and a screwdriver do not do the same thing. They are, although maybe some people would think that they do, but to be really effective for the purpose of that tool, they really do different jobs and they have different purposes. And so it's the same thing with all of the tools and resources that we have in front of us for our job search, in the sense that they can do different things for you at different points and get you different information that you might need throughout your job search. And so, maybe thinking about using several different types of job search websites in conjunction with networking opportunities and initial interviews. All of those things work together to make a really successful job search. But if you were to only use, say, for example, job search websites, you might not find your job search as fruitful as you would hope it would be, right? I can't tell you how many times I've heard from people before that have said, hey, I've been applying for jobs on this website for 6 months now, and I have no idea why I haven't gotten any, feedback or traction in my job search. Well, so let's look at some other things that you can do for your job search, and especially such as networking and informational interviews that can help beef up your connection within that industry. And the last thing here really is to think about, can you pivot? It sort of relates to an earlier point that I made. Can you pivot to a sort of a more adjacent position using your transferable skills or skills that you have from the past that will still get you to a place where you would like to be, or to a very similar place? I talked about this a lot in the last series that I did, but people who try to make a complete 180 career change, that's more of an uphill battle, right? But if you try to make some really small pivots or small changes along the way in terms of the types of roles that you seek, I think that over time you will find your career change more successful. Right. So how can you look for positions that build on the skills that you have from the past or your current roles that will get you to a slightly different place that will then in the future lead you to a different place, right? So they're all going to build on each other. So hopefully this is helpful in just sort of thinking about some ways you can reimagine your search. So I want to talk a little bit here, and I think in a few slides we will have a break for questions. So if you have any questions, certainly throw those in the Q&A box. About strategy, this is, again, when I talk to people, getting and staying organized and being really intentional about the job search is one of the things that I notice. If there were top 5 things, this would be in the top 5 things that I notice that people it just sort of glazes over, right? Because you're so focused on the end goal of finding a job that you sometimes forget to take a step back and do some of these things. And so some of these might be reminders for you. Some of these might be good, pointers that you hadn't thought about before. But first of all, in terms of getting organized, really tracking your job applications. When I found myself on an active job search a few years ago before I took this position here at the university, I really, I think I stopped counting at 40 job applications. So, I realized very quickly early on that I had to start keeping track of these things. And really the goal here is whatever method works for you. So if you are a spreadsheet nerd like me, who hates to admit that they like them just a little bit, use a spreadsheet, use a paper and pen, use a Word document. However you can organize this information would be really helpful for you. Just please don't use your email inbox. Because a lot of times I will ask people, hey, how are you organizing this information? And they'll tell me, well, I just have an email folder that I throw all this stuff into. And usually that's not working out so well for them, right? It's hard to sort through stuff, and it's hard to just sort of organize stuff by particular applications. So whatever speaks to you best, use that. Things that are good to track here would be, of course, the position title, the company name, any kind of like requisition number that was associated with that job posting, because that would be a good reference for when you go to follow up with HR. Any kind of contact information that you have for that job posting, when you followed up, what that person told you, all that's really good information just to help you in the long run, because it could be at least a few weeks, if not 1 or 2 months, before you could hear back from a job and say, hey, we saw your application, we're interested in interviewing you. And then you would need to remind yourself what that job was. Because if you're really actively on the job search, you're going to be submitting a fair amount of applications, and it's really easy to forget those things. Another pointer here, use desktop folders to track your actual documents. This was really helpful for me. Again, takes things out of your email inbox, which can get a little bit, because it's not probably the only thing that you're organizing in your email inbox. And so it takes things out of there. So on a Google Drive or on your desktop or whatever, using the folders to keep track of the applications that you submit by job is really helpful. Setting weekly goals for yourself here is really about being intentional. And so starting with small baby steps. One of the things that I did early on in my job search was I picked a day, usually Monday morning, because that's when I would get up and get going. I usually took some time off on the weekends. So Monday morning, I would sit down and sort of, think about, okay, what is it that, big picture this week, what is it that I want to accomplish? Start with small baby steps here. And if one of your goals for the week is to, it says do resume, try to be more specific with that. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in a little bit. But when you do set goals for yourself, make sure that they're SMART goals, so specific. I don't remember what the rest of it stands. I think measurable, attainable. But make sure that they're really specific instead of just networking. Because when you look at, if you have 5 things on your to-do list for that week and one of them is networking, that feels very overwhelming when you first look at it and then you think to yourself, I have to do all of the networking. There's no way I'm going to do this that week. Do this week. And then so you don't end up doing it, right? So maybe your goal with that is to reach out to 2 to 3 new contacts, right? And that accomplishes your goal of networking for that week. So just be really intentional and think about what you want to do for that week. Write it down and post it somewhere too. Really being intentional here about your scheduling and how you are working on this. Because if you are, and this looks a little bit different for everybody, right? Because some people are working full or part-time while job searching. Some are job searching while not working at this point. And so depending on where you are, just being really thoughtful about how you're scheduling your time and where and how you're spending it. Because I can tell you, lesson learned, if you're spending the vast majority of your day in front of your computer solely focusing on job search, that is enough to drive you over the edge. So take breaks, frequent breaks throughout the day. And definitely don't, unless you have meetings scheduled all day, don't plan to spend 8 hours a day on this, right? Um, that is not necessarily going to get you a job quicker than taking frequent breaks, or maybe working, 4 to 6 hours a day, or however long you choose to on this, right? So just being really, I think, thoughtful with yourself about how you're doing this. And the last thing here, just being really mindful and understanding that hiring, companies are still at this point maybe even a little bit unsure about budgets and their capacity to hire. So if you apply for a job and it gets pulled, really just not taking things personally in that regard, and understanding that the companies might be going through some challenges that have nothing to do with you and your ability as a candidate to do that job. So just a few pointers here about sort of hidden jobs and being ready and whatnot. Again, just as a reminder, companies hire when they need people, and it just as a reminder that that's might not be always on your schedule, which is very frustrating. But they certainly will. I think that, again, hope is on the horizon. They will open up when you know pretty soon here. So they might be needing more folks, and as they're realizing that budgets can be a little bit more flexible. A reminder here too that it does take about an average of 45 days to hire a new person, which, if you are actively job searching, 45 days seems like an eternity, right? It seems like so long. But in the world of a recruiter, it's not that long, right? And so just remember that when you apply for a job, it might be, again, a few weeks to a couple months before you hear back from them in terms of whether they're interested in interviewing you. And so that's, again, why it's just important to stay organized and keep track of things and save those job descriptions that you apply for. Spreading your effort here, again, the sort of thinks about like the toolbox concept. When you spread your effort with your job search, you're not focusing on one thing solely, and so forgetting about some other things that are important here. So things like, determining what is important to you with your job search, what your priorities are. Maybe a commutable distance is really important to you, or other qualities or cultural things about the organizations the target companies that you have on your list. Making sure that when you do apply for jobs, they're fitting your backgrounds and skills, right? Because again, when people usually say, I haven't really heard back from folks, one of the things that I think about and talk to them about is, are you applying for things that are appropriate for you? And so let's look at that and think about it. Making personal, meaningful connections. This all goes back to the networking piece. Last week I did the webinar on networking, and so just again, making sure that when you do network with people or have informational interviews, that it's a really purposeful conversation, and it's going to get you the information that you need and allow you to make a really meaningful connection. And again, just being persistent here. In terms of job search numbers, or job application numbers, excuse me, there's really no magic number that you should be applying to or hiring. There's no particular process. There's not like a lockstep thing that you need to follow to guarantee that you're going to get a job, right? Again, thinking about what are all of the tools in your job search toolkit, making sure that you're using those all pretty evenly and fairly, and applying for jobs that are appropriate for you, I think, is really the best piece here. So I think after these slides, I've got pause for questions. And so one thing a concept that I really love, it's been really helpful to me in the past, is really thinking about who can I have in my corner, right? If you haven't heard about this, you might hear other people call it a number of things, but really developing a personal advisory board for yourself. This is sort of like your fan club, right? Your professional fan club. And so this is a group of people, no particular set number of folks, but within your professional networks that have, really specific and diverse set of skills that you admire and that can help you along your career journey, right? And they may sort of flex in and out of your circle, and you might have some folks that stay for a long period of time with you. But these are really like an advisory board would be for a company or an organization. They're people that can help you with really big career problems, transitions, or making big decisions with your career because, we cannot do anything in this life alone, and we cannot operate in a vacuum. We need other people to help us along the way. And so I think this is a great concept to think about. You know, there's a lot of different kinds of people that we can invite into our personal advisory board. And so those that, some people will just give you really constructive feedback. Maybe it's not always the information that you want to hear, but it is really helpful advice for you, right? There are people that we could invite into our circle who are influencers, right? And so those are the folks that say, hey, I understand what you're looking for, what kind of advice you need. I can connect you with this person. So they're the people that know people, right? And are willing to make those referrals and introductions for you. Sometimes we need cheerleaders in our life just to say, you know what, you are doing great on this job search. Keep it up. Wonderful job, right? Because some days we are just hard and we just need people that are in our corner and saying we're doing a good job to remind us. And some are role models, right? So some are maybe older professionals that have been there or are in places that you wish to be, who can be that sort of mentor and that role model for you. These can be a lot of different kind of people in your life, old bosses, former colleagues, friends in a similar field, or those that are in sort of your career changer, maybe more of a target field. I always like to think about starting with those people that you know, and then asking for introductions to other people. And excuse me, these would be folks that, you don't necessarily reach out to them and say, hey, would you be on my personal advisory board? But, you can certainly develop and nurture that relationship over time to where your conversations become one of, the kind of back and forth that you want with them. So just a concept that I would like to introduce to you, is something to think about as you are moving forward on this journey. And this is just a really great sort of more visual explanation of what I'm thinking about. I'll send out these slides so you can have these, and I'll also send out after the webinar, I will send out an actual PDF copy of this if you want to have it and sort of use it for yourself. All right, so I do have a pause for questions, and I will give you all just a little bit to get some questions in if you have any. Okay, so I don't see any questions at this point. So we will go ahead and dive into some more content. Somebody asked in the chat, can I send out the links? Yeah, of course. They will, when I send out the presentation, it's in a format that you can access the links very easily. So this is sort of the technology piece of the job search, right? If it's been a while, or heck, if it hasn't been a while, maybe you job searched last year or the year before or something, this is still a really good sort of reminder of where we're at with the technology. So applicant tracking systems, you might not know them by their formal name, but they are, if you don't know about them, they are usually the things that people complain about with job search in terms of you know, my resume was never seen by a person, it was only seen by a robot, those kind of things. So applicant tracking systems have been around for a while now. You can thank the Great Recession for that. That's when they really came to prominence and were frequently used by by HR departments and recruiters. Because what happened with the Great Recession, of course, was the job market was flooded with applicants all over the place, and recruiters and HR managers just, I mean, did not know how to handle the influx. That was a really fortunate or unfortunate, however you want to look at it, intersection of a need and the technology was there, right? The systems nowadays have come a long way from the very rudimentary systems that they were back in 08, 09. And so really they have now evolved into a way for recruiters to quickly sort through a ton of resumes that they still get for job applications. For them, it keeps their resumes in one place and helps them stay organized in terms of the applicants, the things that they're submitting, the materials that the applicants are submitting for their jobs. How do they work? So they're all stored in one database. I guess one of the advantages to this for job seekers is that your resumes and application materials are stored in this database for a longer amount of time. And because this is an organization system as well for the recruiters, this allows them to be able to easily refer back to your resume for future postings, right? And it just does help them overall manage their applications for their jobs. Who is using applicant tracking systems? A lot of people, right? The vast majority of Fortune 500 companies. Excuse me. You should know that there are quite a few ATS on the market today. Over to the right, the images that you see are really just a sort of a snapshot of some of the bigger ones that you probably run into. But most really large companies do use them. So in terms of the company perspective, one of the drawbacks is that these are typically quite expensive to purchase and use, right? And so, I mean, it is an entire software system. And so some really small organizations might not be using them. And we'll talk in just a minute about how you might be able to recognize if somebody is using them. But typically the budget piece, the cost piece is a little bit prohibitive for companies that just might not have in their budget to use them. So in terms of like the recruiter searching the systems, so there's a few different ways that they can use them. Viewing applications. So some HR departments will actually review each application that comes in. Like this is just sort of an organization tool for them. A fair amount of the HR departments will use these systems to give automatic rankings. And we'll dive into this in just a moment. But they will give automatic rankings to the applications that are received based on certain algorithms and criteria that are in alignment with things in the job description. And if I think the first webinar in this series that I did was on resumes and cover letters, and I covered some information about how to, in terms of your resume format, how to sort of get, play nicely with the applicant tracking systems. And the ATS also allow recruiters to do keyword searches here. And, based on words or phrases that are in their job description and matching that with the candidate applications that they see. So you're probably wondering to yourself, great information, thank you. But how can I figure out if a place that I'm applying to is using this? There's a few ways here. So usually, like if they're using an online portal or an online application portal, check to see again like what that first part of that URL is, because it's more than likely it will definitely have the name of that ATS in it, right? Because it is a software system that they're using, they have to identify it that way. So it could be at the bottom of their online application page. It could be in the web address, excuse me, or it could be in the fine print. I apologize. These allergies are really, it's a lovely time of the year. So those are a few ways that you can tell if they are using it. One of the big giveaways would be if they are using an online job portal, check to see that URL to see if they're using one. So I wanted to talk a little bit too about what employers see in terms of your application. And hang on just a second. Okay, sorry about that. So in terms of what employers see, so of course you're going to submit your resume PDF or a doc format, and what they see on their end. And again, this is just a snapshot of one of the many ATS out there, but typically, and we will go over here. So typically what they're going to see is a score. Like I said, most of them are going to use usually like a 0 or 1 to 10 score for each candidate. And again, usually when they assign a score, this is based on how well your application materials are matching up to what they're seeking in the job description. It is, I think, important to know here too that it adds the years of experience by month. And so if you see the experience row here, office administrator 2.3 years, executive assistant 0.8 years. And this is why it is important to have your dates on your resume so they can see that, because otherwise they might see 0 years for something, right? And employers might initially see some of your resume in a condensed column format, so sort of parceled out. But it does have the potential to be viewed by the employer if they see a high score, right? So this 9.0, 9.0, 8.8, they're pretty high scores in terms of the applications here. So again, this is just a snapshot of what they would probably see. So when the ATS takes your resume and puts it into their system, this is how it's going to parcel it out. And in just a moment, I'll have some tips for your resume, some quick tips about how you can work with that formatting. Here we are. So in terms of formatting for your resume with ATS, simple is better. Just remember that. So things that you would want to avoid, these are going to confuse the applicant tracking system. These are going to make it hard for it to translate your resume information into the system for the recruiter to see. So things like tables. I know tables make it really easy to do things on your resume, but they're very confusing to ATS. Text boxes, logos, and images, which we would never really recommend logos and images anyway. Graphics, graphs, or visuals. Hyperlinks is a big thing that most people sort of overlook because you usually always put your email address on your resume. And so you just want to, right click and take that hyperlink out and just have the text of your email address, or if you're putting your LinkedIn URL on there or anything else that you might link to, just take the hyperlinks out. Headers and footers. I know, again, that's sort of like tables. It makes things a little bit easier to do, but that's very confusing. And uncommon heading sections and fonts. So in terms of fonts, you'll see over there on the right, just keep it really simple for them. So some of more standard fonts is what you want to stick with. Ones that are really fancy might look cool, but they're just not going to translate well at all. And so, but some of the things that you can still certainly use, which to sort of differentiate your resume or sort of visually separate some text in your document to make it a little bit more appealing. Bold, underline, italics. I don't recommend using all 3 of those on the same set of information, but you can use those throughout your resume document to sort of separate information. You can use colors, they'll be reverted back to black, but I would also just generally suggest that, not using a lot of colors would be helpful. It's just sort of visually unappealing to the reader. Definitely still use bullets, but stick to the standard circles. I know that, again, feels a little bit boring perhaps, but it is, that's really going to help your resume sort of get through. So just stick to the standard ones. I know that other ones are really cool looking, again, but it's just going to be confusing with that. And if you have any questions on this, just let me know. I know that, a lot of people that I chat with, especially if you're in any kind of a creative industry, they want to do something a little bit more in line with their creativity, right? But you could consider having two versions of your resume, one that is more ATS friendly, which you would use for those kind of applications. And then you could consider having another one that's a little bit more in line with your creativity, but it still gets your message across, which you use for networking purposes or referrals or things like that, where they wouldn't be going through an applicant tracking system, but would still be visually appealing for somebody else to see. All right, and I see we have a couple questions here in the box, which thank you very much. Yes, this video will be posted. Absolutely, thanks for asking. And I'll send out a link for it afterwards. Let's see, let me just give a second to read this question. Okay, so somebody that has taken a break from the workforce and is unsure of when they will be available to re-enter, but sees a job that's a good fit. They want to throw their hat in the ring, handling uncertainty about whether it'd actually be able to start a new job anytime soon. Okay. So maybe I'm an eternal optimist here. That's a great question and a complicated question and answer. However, I would say generally speaking, remember that I'm an optimist, but I think if you find a job that you are a really good fit for, and you would be really excited to apply for it, I would apply for it. I don't know how else to say it, because one, their hiring process could take a few months. So you could apply for it now, and by the time that you would be interviewing and possibly even getting an offer, that could be a better time for you personally to start the job, right? So thinking in those terms, but also I think, considering the fact that if it's a really great fit for you and you really want to apply for it, it's probably not going to be coming back around in 6 months. So if you want it, go for it, right? And in application, I think the last important thing to remember here too is that just because you submit an application for something doesn't commit you to that job. It just throws your hat in the ring, right? It gives you a chance to be interviewed. And even if you get an interview, even if you get to the final stages, that does not commit you to taking that job, right? The interview is a process. It is an interview process for them to get to know you. You get to know them, see if it's a good fit, an offer is made, and then, you have more negotiating power when an offer is on the table and any other time in the job search process. And that is not your final answer, right? That doesn't commit you to anything. So I would say I'm an eternal optimist, but I would definitely recommend seizing the opportunity and applying for it if it comes across your desk, because it doesn't commit you to anything. But that's a great question. All right, let's see. We've got one more here. If you're still unsure of what exactly you're looking for with your next job, what's the best way to reach out to people on your advisory board to get their help with the job search process? Great question. I mean, I would say in the situation, even if you're unsure about what you're looking for, that's okay, right? I don't know that people, if you're thinking about folks to invite into your personal advisory board, into your trusted circle, you don't have to have everything figured out for them. I think that's perfectly okay, right? And that's a fine place to be in. It's sort of like when people schedule time to chat with me on a one-on-one. I don't expect people to have everything figured out. That's why I'm here. And if you're talking to a trusted person about your situation, um, I guarantee you they've been there before. And so I think if you're just genuine and honest with them about, this is where I'm at on the process. I'm really unsure about things. Here's some thoughts that I've had lately. Maybe they can help you make sense of them, or they can share some experiences that they've had and how they've handled these situations. To sort of help you figure out how you might navigate that. But I would say genuine honesty is probably the best in this case, because the other alternative here for you is to not reach out to people when you are at this sort of crossroads in your life. And then what are you left with, right? You're left with your own thoughts, which, might not get you to the place you want to be. So I think bouncing ideas off of people is a really great thing. So I hope that you definitely do that. All right. So we've got just a couple more slides and then we're going to wrap things up today. So my last couple slides here are just sort of about refreshing yourself a little bit if you're feeling like, because again, I've totally been there. I've absolutely and been in some active job searches myself. And I think you sort of go through a process with this where so some weeks you're feeling great and things are clicking. And sometimes you really need to sort of step back and just, you're feeling like you're in a rut and you're not sure what to do about it. And you just need to refresh yourself. So staying motivated is definitely the hardest thing for sure. I think a job search is, mostly about the mental battle that you go through. And again, what we were talking about earlier, just being really specific with whatever you sit down to write your to-do list for, if it's for that day or that week, or, maybe, hey, this month, this is what I want to accomplish. So instead of having really broad stroked goals like network or redo my resume, which when you look at those, they feel overwhelming. And you think, well, there's no way that I'm going to accomplish that today. So it just sort of reframe those and be much more specific. And that's going to help you look at that goal, because if your goal for the day is to redo your resume, you might think, first of all, I have no idea where to start with that. This is going to take me forever. I'm not going to get accomplished today. Start with one section, right? Like maybe I want to either figure out how to write, or, you want to revamp your summary section on your resume, and that's it, right? And if you're feeling good and motivated about stuff, you do more on your resume. But hey, at least you accomplished that goal. Remembering that looking for a job is a job for sure. It does require hours. And again, like we were talking about earlier, being intentional and specific with things, making sure that you are creating a schedule for yourself and work hours. And as with anything in life, being flexible with that. If things come up during the day or things change for you, that's fine. But at least you aren't waking up every day and thinking, okay, well, I'm going to get my coffee. I'm going to sit down here and work until 5 o'clock, because that's enough to drive you crazy. So making sure that you're just scheduling the time that you need to work on that, and scheduling in breaks. Writing down your goals, again, I know we've talked about this, but for me, this was incredibly helpful. I'm a very visual person. So if you're like that, write down your goals, right? You could break your goals into short-term goals. So maybe the next, 1 to 3 months. And then you could do some sort of intermediate and long-term goals. Write them down and put them somewhere where you will see them frequently. Think about what is motivating to you, and make sure that those are incorporated as well. Again, taking time off for yourself, I think this is really, really important. And doing something that brings you joy, right? It doesn't have to be something big and elaborate. Like, for example, me, when I was in a job search, it was really helpful for me to do something tactile with my hands, because so much of the job search nowadays is computer oriented. So you're sitting in front of a screen, or especially nowadays, if you're having a networking call, it might be over video. or it's going to be over the phone. And so doing something very tactile where you can see immediate results was super helpful for me, just to get out of my own head and sort of escape escape what was going on with the job search. And plus, when if you do if you get back into a hobby or something, or do a project, you usually see really immediate results, which is also really great, because the job search, you don't always see immediate results. And so that's very satisfying. And the last thing here, just give yourself some grace, please. Things will, like I said earlier, things will seem to be clicking along really well sometimes in your job search, and sometimes they just won't. And that's okay. This is all part of the process for this. But what is most important here is how you react to that, right? So if you just want to throw your hands up in the air and walk away from it all and never think about it again, probably not the best reaction, right? So maybe an alternative to that would be just giving yourself a day or two off, step away, get outside for a little bit, and then sort of coming back to things with a fresh perspective. So if you're wondering to yourself, as we wrap things up today, what are, if you're feeling in a rut, what are some things that you can do to refresh your job search? Lots of things here on this list. You can, again, target your resume. So looking at some job descriptions that you are targeting, and figuring out how you can tailor your resume to meet those. Talking about the personal board of directors from earlier. Strengthening your elevator pitch. So especially if you are on the networking piece, how would you introduce yourself to somebody, and how would you tell your story to them in terms of where you are now and what you're looking for. The last job search that I had, I certainly had to do that. And it was very helpful to think about, how would you introduce yourself? Because if you're on the job search now, say if you're in a situation where maybe you have taken time out of the workforce, and it's been a few months or a few years or something like that, and now you're ready to get back into it, how would you introduce yourself? How would you tell your story to somebody? I did a webinar on that in the last Confident Career Changes series about telling your professional story, which might be helpful to you. But I think really thinking about, because inevitably networking contacts will ask you, and in a very harmless way, right? But they'll still ask you, oh, okay, so tell me what's going on with you and kind of what you're looking for. And if you get that question and you are wholly unprepared for it, like I did once, it will throw you for a loop, and you will find yourself stammering for words, and then you sound really silly. So just sort of practicing things and getting that figured out for how you would explain that. Other things you can do: create a LinkedIn profile or update one. If you have questions on that, let me know. Working on the networking piece. Upskilling too is another really good way to sort of feel like you're refreshing your job search. And so LinkedIn Learning, which bought out lynda.com, if you are a current University of Richmond student, you get access to LinkedIn Learning for free. There are a number of other sites out there that can give you free or discounted resources to learn new skills. Say you need to refresh Excel, or if you're in a creative industry, learning the Adobe suite or things like that, I think would be really helpful. So there's a lot of other stuff on this list that you can definitely take a look at and see if anything is sort of speaking to you. But I will go ahead and wrap up. If anybody has any questions, I'm going to get a sip of water and let you all throw any in the Q&A. Okay, so don't see any questions now. I hope that means this was all very helpful information. So as we do wrap things up, again, I just want to thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope that you found this really, thank you so much for your compliments in the chat. I appreciate that. I was hoping that they would be really helpful content. And so again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me over email. You can visit us careerservices.richmond.edu or alumni.richmond.edu, and got a bunch of really great resources for you there. The last session in this Back to Basics series will be next week. And hopefully we will welcome some much needed warmer weather at that point. We will be covering interviews and negotiations. So again, and with this one in particular, we'll also be talking about virtual interviewing because we are still in that space where I'm not sure companies are opening up a lot of in-person interviews. We'll be talking about negotiations when you get to that point in the interview process. So again, that'll be Tuesday the 30th at 12 p.m. But I do hope to hear from you all if you have, if you want to talk about your specific situations, and we can chat about some strategy and ideas for that. So again, thank you all so much for hanging out with me. Hope you all have a lovely day.